The story kicks off on the night of November 12th, 2010, just before midnight. Two police officers are cruising through a shortcut in the dense forest of Trichy, India, when their car suddenly sputters and breaks down. They pull over, but what they find next shocks them to their core. The lifeless body of a young girl in an appalling state. 2 hours later, the investigation begins. Senior Officer Ram Kumar receives a chilling report. The girl's body bears an eerie resemblance to a case from 3 days ago. The hair is pulled back, tied to her hands, and her head is forced upward in unsettling similarity. Days later in Chennai, Posh receives a warm welcome from his extended family as he celebrates his promotion to assistant inspector. His excitement is palpable as he arrives at the Special Criminal Investigation Department, ready to jump into action. His superior, Dharma, assigns him to work with the renowned Logan Nathan, a senior officer with a reputation for being strict, serious, and highly respected. Dharma makes it clear Logan Nathan is the best of the best, and Posh is about to learn from the finest. Logan Nathan isn't thrilled about mentoring Posh. Reluctantly, he accepts the decision made by headquarters. He'll have to oversee Posh's progress for 3 months. If Posh proves to be a burden, Logan Ann won't hesitate to cut him loose. Not long after, Dharma receives an urgent message from the Ministry of Home Affairs. Logan Ann is officially assigned to lead the investigation into the serial murders in Trichy. With his experience in high-profile cases, he's the perfect choice, and as expected, Parash will assist him. Dharma tells Posh to take this opportunity to learn from Lone Nathan's methods. This is his first major case. Logan Nathan isn't convinced Posh is up to the task. The rookie is visibly nervous, fumbling through tasks and asking absurd questions like, "Who's the murderer?" Even though the investigation has barely started, Logan Nathan can't shake the feeling that this might be a rocky start. The team gathers at Chennai Airport, ready for their trip. Dharma has also sent along Veena, a technical assistant tasked with handling the paperwork and taking detailed notes. Upon arriving in Trichy, they're greeted by the Chief of Police, Sundara. Unexpectedly, Pakish takes a moment on the side, earbuds in, trying to calm his nerves before diving into his first major case. Meanwhile, Ramkumar stands with other senior officers, his frustration simmering. He's eager to crack the case on his own and make a name for the Trichy police. But with the case now in the hands of outsiders, he intentionally delays his meeting with Logan Nathan. Despite this, Loganathan, known for his unwavering punctuality, doesn't take kindly to the delay. When the meeting finally starts, Ram Kumar takes the lead, presenting the grim details. The first victim, an immigrant girl, was found early in the morning of November 10th, lying in a cornfield. An autopsy reveals she likely died the night before around 11 p.m. In her pocket, they found a train ticket. The second victim, Malavika, a 26-year-old PhD student, was found dead in a remote forest. Just like the first victim, she had been killed in the same chilling manner. No signs of assault or theft. The media hadn't caught wind of the first murder yet, but Malavika's father, a senior journalist, wasted no time bringing it to the public's attention. Last seen studying at a friend's house. Malavika had left around 9 p.m. Her body was discovered 4 kilometers away. Strangely, there was no connection between the two victims. Meanwhile, Logan Nathan made it clear he didn't need Ram Kumar's help with the investigation. That only stoked Ram Kumar's growing frustration. With tensions rising, the three of them headed to the morgue to dig deeper. On the way to the morgue, Posh, a passionate reader, couldn't help but share a story from a book by John Douglas. It detailed a chilling murder case in Atlanta from 1974, and the similarities to their current case were too uncanny to ignore. But Logan Ann, uninterested, dismissed it as nothing more than idle chatter. When they reached the morgue, Logan Ann entered alone to meet with the forensic doctor, eager to dive into the details of the victim's body. Posh and Veena were left to wait outside, exchanging uneasy glances. Inside, the doctor revealed grim details. The cause of death was asphyxiation from severe strangulation, with deep marks still visible on the victim's neck. But what caught the doctor's attention was the strangulation method. It appeared the killer had strangled the victim from the front, not from behind as usual. Additionally, the doctor's findings were chilling. The killer had executed the crime with unnerving precision. There were no fingerprints, no nail marks, no stray hairs or skin particles. The victim had shown no signs of struggle or resistance, and there were no traces of chloroform or sedatives. The cause of death was confirmed as asphyxiation from strong strangulation. Logan Nathan absorbed the details with a focused intensity, then allowed Peacock Ash to enter, hoping a fresh perspective might reveal something new. But as soon as Prakash laid eyes on the horrific condition of the body, he recoiled and immediately vomited. Logan wasn't surprised. It was clear that Posh was still a rookie, unprepared for the brutal reality of the investigation. He didn't hesitate to order Posh to return to Chennai, insisting he needed to focus on solving the case. But Posh, determined not to be dismissed so easily, stubbornly refused to leave, insisting on staying to continue the investigation. Shortly after, Sundara drove them to the hotel where Logan Nathan instructed Posh to meet him early the next morning to visit the crime scene. In his hotel room, Prakash dove into the case files, but as he read, his eyes drifted to Logan Ann's back. Deep scars and jagged marks covered his skin, remnants of a past ordeal that Logan Ann had clearly survived. As Posh continued to examine the files, Logan Ann noticed the medal pinned to his jacket, awarded for being the best marksman at the police academy. But Logan Ann barely gave it a second thought. He had seen too many retired officers who had never fired a single shot, not because they didn't know how, but because they lacked the guts to do it. To Logan Ann, Posh seemed like someone who hid behind academic achievements, too easily intimidated and not cut out for the real work. Frustrated by the lack of respect, Posh decided to clear his mind and headed for the rooftop. Veena, noticing his tension, followed him up. She revealed that this was her third time working with a Logan Nathan and that she was used to his tough demeanor. Moments later, Veena revealed her impressive background. She had studied at MIT in the United States with multiple job offers awaiting her there. Yet she chose to return to India, believing that making a tangible difference in society was more fulfilling than working for foreign companies. Her words to Posh were simple yet powerful. If he put in the work, others would eventually recognize his dedication. Her reassurance calmed him, and for the first time in a while, he felt a sense of comfort. The next morning, Posh approached Logan Nathan with newfound resolve. He was determined to prove himself and vowed to dedicate himself fully to the case. However, Logan Nathan showed no response, his demeanor as cold and unyielding as ever. Later, the team arrived at the second crime scene. Posh quietly observed Logan Nathan's methods, noting how focused and meticulous he was in his approach. As they examined the scene, Logan began considering the case files, urging Posh to reflect on the killer's motives and character. The investigation was no longer just about the facts, it was about understanding the mind behind the crimes. Logan Ann turned to Posh with a sharp command, instructing him to kneel in the position of the victim. He asked Posh to imagine his hair tied to his hands, forcing his gaze upward at an unseen killer. As Posh complied, Logan Nathanathan carefully observed his mind, quickly drawing conclusions. He believed the killer was a psychopath driven by deep insecurities, seeking to dominate and humiliate the victim. The nature of the crime felt personal, as though the killer thought he could exact revenge by taking their lives in such a controlled, calculated way. Logan Ann theorized that the killer deliberately avoided killing the victims on the spot. Instead, he took them to secluded places, spending time with them, letting their bodies decompose slowly. He was convinced that by leaving no traces, the perfect crime would remain unsolved. Just as they began to process this new theory, another report came in. A third victim had been found. The team rushed to the scene where a crowd had already gathered, reporters swarming the area. The third victim, another young girl, had been discovered in a bamboo forest on November the 16th. Logan Nathan was visibly frustrated when they couldn't determine the exact time of death. Meanwhile, Posh carefully inserted a thermometer into the victim's ear, measuring the temperature of her brain. He knew that the body's temperature drops by 1 degree every hour after death. A normal brain temperature is 37 degrees Celsius, and the victim's was just 25.5. From this, Posh quickly deduced that she had likely died on the night of November 15th around 10 or 11 p.m. Logan Nathan observed Posh's deduction with a rare hint of approval. Impressed, he made the decision to meet with the Commissioner of Police in Trichy, leaving Posh to continue the investigation on his own. The third victim, Sayoni, was 26 years old. Posh soon learned that she had volunteered to teach underprivileged children in her spare time. Intrigued, he visited the foundation where she had taught, hoping to uncover any connection. Murderer halts their actions due to an external disturbance, only to be triggered back into violence later. That might shed light on the killer's motives. During questioning, a staff member mentioned that Sayan's motorcycle had broken down the previous evening. Despite offers of help, she had refused and left in a hurry. As a result, Pash immediately instructed Sundar to track down the motorcycle's license plate number. With no time to waste, Pash headed to the nearest workshop only to find it was a car repair shop. The mechanic there claimed he had never seen Sioni, but agreed to contact the shop owner for more information. While waiting, Pash stepped into the owner's office and noticed something strange: seeds inside a bottle and a hunting rifle. When the owner finally arrived, he confirmed that Sayan's motorcycle had indeed broken down. But the repair wouldn't happen until morning, so Sayan had left her bike behind and walked off into the night. Soon Pash turned to the workshop owner, noticing fresh marks from a hunting rifle on his chest. Curious, he asked about the owner's activities after Sayan left. The owner explained that he had gone hunting for wild rabbits with friends after she departed. With this information, Sundara quickly checked with the forest ranger, confirming that the workshop owner had indeed gone hunting that night, providing a solid alibi. Meanwhile, Logan An was strategizing. He requested 40 armed officers in 10 patrol cars from Ram Kumar to prevent the next murder. Logan Nathan explained that serial killers often share psychological traits with petty thieves, but with a key difference. While thieves typically target elderly women, seeing them as weak and low risk, serial killers go for women in their 20s and 30s. Logan An was certain that the killer was a man somewhere between 45 and 55 years old. Later, Logan Nathan gathered the officers who would assist in the case. He briefed them on the pattern. The murders had occurred every 3 days, November 9th, 12th, and 15th. There was a possibility of a fourth murder on November 18th, but that was still just a theory. The killer could change his pattern, perhaps committing murders every 2 days, or even targeting 2 victims in 1 day. The team had to be ready for anything. On November 18th, all the police officers were given strict orders to blend in as ordinary citizens. They were to station themselves at various locations, removing any signs of their true identity. No police barricades, no stickers on their cars, nothing to raise suspicion. If anyone reported a missing child, or if any officer noticed something out of place, they were to report it directly to Logan. Meanwhile, a young girl home alone went outside to took out the trash and disappeared. Veena quickly relayed the news to Logan Nathan, who wasted no time. He instructed Sundar to check the nearest forest or orchard where the girl had last been seen, dispatching several officers to assist in the search. As Sar deflated the tires of a suspicious car parked nearby, the search began in earnest through the orchard. Just when the tension was rising, Veena called back to give Logan Anand some good news. The girl had simply gone out with her friends and was safely back home. As a result, the team breathed a collective sigh of relief, but Logan Nathan remained focused, knowing the hunt for the killer was far from over. On the other hand, Pash was drawn to a strange noise, and as he approached, he stumbled upon 2 people in the middle of an intimate encounter. He quickly moved past, but his focus snapped back when the body of the missing girl was discovered. It was the same girl who had just been abducted. Her father arrived at the scene moments later, breaking down in agony as he saw the horrifying condition of his daughter. Pash and Loganathan hit a dead end in their search for clues. Frustration settled over them. But then, as if struck by a sudden realization, Lonathan wondered aloud if the immigrant girl's body wasn't the killer's first murder. Perhaps there had been similar cases before. The 3 of them dove into the case files going back 10 years, starting from 2001. After hours of sifting through the records, Veena found a startling number: 236 cases of strangulation. But despite the sheer volume, none of the cases aligned perfectly with the current pattern. The search had not brought them closer to the killer, and the clock was ticking. As the investigation stalled, Pash suddenly recalled something from his readings. He remembered cases where killers stopped their spree only to resume their crimes decades later. Logan Nathan listened intently, nodding in agreement. It made sense that sometimes, with this new lead, the group turned their focus to older files from the 70s. After combing through the records, Pash found a chilling pattern in cases from 1973 to 1979 with 9 victims in total. The victims were all adult women between the ages of 40 and 60, a key difference from the current case. If this was the same killer as Logan Nathan suspected, he would have been young back then, targeting older women who were seen as low risk. A deeper dive into the files revealed another startling connection. All 9 cases had been investigated by the same officer, Inspector John Sebastian. With this breakthrough, Logan Ann wasted no time. He was determined to track down John and get the answers they desperately needed. On the other hand, Paya Shinbina was tasked with continuing to sift through the case files, searching for any pattern that could help them crack the case. As they reviewed the photos of the victims, something unusual caught Pasha's eye: a faint bruise on the neck of the 4th victim. Intrigued, he consulted the doctor, who confirmed that the bruise was an abnormal hematoma, a buildup of blood that suggested a precise, controlled strike. The doctor explained that the human body has 32 pressure points, and if one of these points is hit, it could cause a person to lose consciousness for 10 to 15 minutes. It was possible, the doctor speculated, that the killer had learned this technique online. However, in the older cases from 30 years ago, the killer likely learned it from a book. Driven by this new lead, Pash immediately headed to the city library, determined to find something that could explain the killer's methods. After a thorough search, he finally stumbled upon a book from the 70s titled Vital Point Strikes. It seemed likely that this was the reference the killer had used to learn how to incapacitate his victims. Meanwhile, Logan Ann arrived at Jay's house only to be greeted by John's son Kennedy. After a brief exchange, Logan was informed that John had passed away several years ago. Undeterred, Logan explained that he had come because John had been a great help to him during their college days. With a subtle shift, Lo and Nathan turned the conversation to Kennedy, hoping to learn more about the family. Kennedy shared that his father had died of a heart attack while on duty. He also mentioned that he had married in 1979, but his wife had recently passed away just 3 months ago. His son Freddie was studying in New Delhi, and Kennedy worked as a photographer, an occupation reflected in the many photos displayed around the house and the old camera he kept in pristine condition. But when Logan Ann picked up one of the photos, Kennedy quickly wiped it down, an anxious twitch in his movements. In that moment, Logan Ann picked up on something subtle but telling. Kennedy had obsessive-compulsive disorder. The need for cleanliness, order, and perfection was clear. Logan now knew that Kennedy's meticulous nature wasn't just a quirk. It was a condition that defined how he lived. With this information, Logan Nathan immediately began to suspect that Kennedy was the serial killer. His gut told him something wasn't right. When Prakash later informed him that Kennedy had once borrowed the book Vital Point Strikes, Logan Nathan's suspicions only grew. If Kennedy was indeed the killer, his pattern seemed clear. He had stopped his killing spree in 1979 after a major life change, getting married. But after police reported that the killer had already been caught, the suspect's fingerprints were found on the victim. Her jewelry was in his possession, and he had confessed to all the murders. Still, Logan, Nathan, and Pash weren't convinced. This man didn't fit the profile. There had been no signs of theft with any of the victims, and it seemed more likely that he was a petty thief who had been coerced into a confession by the police in Shisham, eager to close the case and calm the public. Despite their doubts, the case was officially closed, and they were instructed to return to Chennai. But the following morning, the news took another shocking turn. The suspect who had been captured so confidently was found dead, having done the unthinkable. Logan, Nathan, and Pash were certain something didn't add up. With their suspicions confirmed, they decided to continue investigating Kennedy in secret, determined to uncover the truth. On the night of November 24th, 3 days after the 5th victim's death, Logan, Nathan, and Pash were on high alert, waiting for Kennedy to leave his house. As they anticipated, Kennedy stepped out, but to their surprise, he was simply heading to a nearby convenience store. Recognizing the opportunity, Logan instructed Parash to blend in as a customer so they wouldn't lose sight of him. But just as Pash was blending in, Kennedy suddenly grabbed him, his eyes narrowing as he recognized him from the house next door. With a smile, Kennedy introduced himself and, in a friendly gesture, invited Pash over for dinner. Despite Pash's initial refusal, Kennedy insisted, and Pash, knowing this might be his chance to check the house, reluctantly agreed. Once inside, Kennedy asked Pash to close and lock the door behind him. It was a small request, but it immediately raised Posh's suspicions. Meanwhile, Logan Nathan remained outside watching closely. As they moved deeper into the house, Posh noticed that the previously locked room was now open. Seeing an opportunity, he excused himself to use the bathroom, but instead he made his way straight to the room while Kennedy was busy preparing food. Inside the room, Posh immediately recognized it as a photo developing area. At first, everything seemed ordinary, but then he noticed something off. A photo tucked behind a frame. His heart stopped when he saw it. The ninth victim, the last victim from the 30-year-old case. Shock flooded through him, but before he could react, Kennedy struck. With precise force, he hit a pressure point on Parash's neck, knocking him unconscious. In an instant, Posh was tied up, helpless. Just as Kennedy moved to open the doorbell rang. It was Logan Nathan. Without hesitation, Loganathan pulled out his gun, swiftly entering and rescuing Posh from the photo room. As Loganathan handcuffed Kennedy, he grabbed the photo frame, opening it to reveal 8 more photos, each one of a woman who had been murdered between 1973 and 1979. Despite the undeniable evidence, Kennedy stubbornly refused to confess to the murders of the past. But everything changed when his son Freddie called. Logan Nathan threatened to show Freddie the photos, and that's when Kennedy broke. He finally admitted to being the killer of the 9th woman, explaining that he couldn't let his son know the truth. Kennedy slowly began to unravel the dark tale of his past. As a teenager, he had lived alone with his father, John, a cruel alcoholic who would beat Kennedy mercilessly whenever he failed to meet his father's impossibly high standards of cleanliness and perfection. This relentless abuse was the catalyst for Kennedy's OCD disorder. No matter how hard he tried, nothing was ever good enough, and the physical and emotional scars only deepened. The constant torment took its toll, and Kennedy began skipping school, overwhelmed by depression and a sense of hopelessness. One day his teacher caught him smoking behind the school and threatened to tell his father. His wife's death, Kennedy had resumed his crimes. Determined to act, Logan asked Ramkumar for permission to search Kennedy's house without a warrant. The bureaucratic process would take too long, and Logan Nathan wasn't willing to waste precious time. Additionally, Logan Nathan already had a plan. He would rent the house next door to Kennedy to keep him under surveillance. Officers would be stationed at 2 nearby exits. If Kennedy left his house, the patrol cars could follow him, and the team would have a clear shot to search his home. Within hours, the plan was set into motion. Posh was tasked with going undercover and pretending to move into the house next door. As he kept a close eye on Kennedy, he saw nothing out of the ordinary. Kennedy didn't show any signs of suspicious behavior. On November 21st, 3 days after the 4th victim's death, the officers were on a high alert, ready to track Kennedy the moment he left his house. Posh kept watch, but his attention was briefly drawn to a child standing outside, visibly upset by a loud argument between the child's parents. Just then, Kennedy left his house. Posh wasted no time reporting the sighting to Logan Nathan so the patrol officers could be deployed, but disaster struck. The patrol car broke down, leaving them blind to Kennedy's movements. Without knowing his exact location, Posh was ordered not to search Kennedy's house. 3 hours passed before a breakthrough. Officer Pallabi finally spotted Kennedy's car parked by a railroad crossing. With quiet urgency, Pallabi approached the car. Logan Ann, positioned behind Kennedy's car, immediately instructed Pallabi to search the entire vehicle, including the trunk. But after a thorough inspection, nothing was found. Kennedy explained that he had just returned from the cinema and even presented his movie ticket as proof. When Pallavi pressed him about the plot of the movie, Kennedy skillfully avoided the questions, confirming that he had indeed been to the theater. With no evidence to hold him, Kennedy was let go. But Logan Nathan wasn't convinced. He suspected Kennedy was lying. He could have bought the ticket earlier and simply claimed he had watched the film that night. Deciding to stay on his trail, Logan Nathan ordered Posh to follow Kennedy's car, while he himself went to search Kennedy's house. But when Posh arrived, he found nothing out of the ordinary. No evidence ties Kennedy to the murders. However, there was one locked door that piqued his interest. Logan soon called Posh to leave the house quickly. Kennedy was nearly home. The next morning, the fifth victim was discovered in a dry riverbed. Her lifeless body is a grim reminder of the killer's brutality. She had been murdered the previous night, but to Logan, Nathan, and Pasha's shock, the terrified, Kennedy snapped. In a moment of blind rage, he grabbed a rock and struck the teacher, killing her instantly. Shocked by his own actions, Kennedy fled, praying for forgiveness. But his father, John, and the police could not identify the murderer, as there were no witnesses and no clues. Kennedy felt a strange relief as he tossed the rock, the murder weapon, into a well. But the relief was short-lived. His father's abuse continued, fueling Kennedy's growing rage. He began to seek out more victims, each one a twisted act of revenge against the man who had destroyed him. With every murder, Kennedy felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, especially when his father's frustration grew. He always killed the same way, striking with a rock. But each time he was repulsed by the blood and the violence. Deep down, Kennedy hated what he was doing. He had a strong aversion to killing, and yet he couldn't stop. Kennedy soon switched to a more methodical approach, strangling his victims with a rope. He was repulsed by the sight of blood and wanted to avoid it at all costs. But he couldn't bear to look his victims in the eye, a deep-seated fear and guilt choking him. Despite his careful planning, the victims often fought back fiercely, and Kennedy found himself hurting his own hands in the struggle. It wasn't until he stumbled upon vital point strikes that his methods evolved. He studied the technique of striking pressure points on the neck, a way to knock his victims unconscious with a single precise blow. This discovery gave him a sense of control, and for the first time in years, he felt a strange sense of satisfaction as he watched his father's life unravel. But the guilt never left. He knew he was taking innocent lives, and it ate away at him. In an attempt to atone for his actions, Kennedy began photographing his victims, believing that somehow it was his way of apologizing for what he had done. He even considered ending his spree by killing his father, the root of his anger. But his fear of John kept him from going through with it. The terror he felt for the man who had ruined his life was stronger than his desire for revenge. Then one fateful day, John collapsed from a heart attack and died. It was a cruel twist of fate. The man who had fueled Kennedy's rage was gone. And with that, Kennedy's killing spree came to an abrupt halt in 1979. The driving force behind his madness was finally gone, and so was his need to kill. Logan Nathan was consumed by rage after hearing Kennedy's confession. Without a second thought, he struck Kennedy in a blind fury, disgusted by the barbaric acts Kennedy had committed. But amid the chaos, Posh noticed something troubling, an inconsistency in Kennedy's story. The motive Kennedy had described was revenge. Against his father didn't align with the way the fifth victim had been murdered. Kennedy had always killed with detachment, refusing to look his victims in the eye because of his own deep-seated disgust for the act. His victims had been chosen for his personal vendetta, not out of some twisted need for recognition. But the killer they were dealing with now was different. This killer had no empathy, no hesitation. He made his victims kneel and look him in the eye, reining in their fear, seeking validation for his own actions. This was a man driven by ego, not revenge. And that meant Kennedy couldn't be the killer after all. Kennedy froze in shock, his eyes widening at the realization. He had believed the man the police had caught was the same person who had abducted him. With a tremor in his voice, he confessed that 2 months ago he had been kidnapped by the killer, who introduced himself as Goval. It was revealed that 30 years ago, Goval's family servant had been one of Kennedy's victims, and Goval had witnessed the brutal execution firsthand. Horrified by what he had seen, Goval became obsessed, secretly following Kennedy and watching every murder he committed from the shadows. Over time, he uncovered Kennedy's identity and his address, and began to track his every move. Goval confessed that he had kidnapped Kennedy to learn how he managed to incapacitate his victims without leaving any trace for the police. Goval studied Kennedy's methods, learning how to target the pressure points and render victims unconscious without a sound. Armed with this knowledge, a few days later, he murdered his first victim, the immigrant girl. Kennedy listened, his voice shaking with disgust as he explained that he had stopped killing because he had a purpose to end the cycle of violence. But Goval was different. He was a monster driven by something far darker, someone who would never stop. Kennedy couldn't even say what Gaval looked like, as his eyes had always been covered during their encounters, leaving him only with Gavil's chilling voice. However, one detail stuck in Kennedy's mind. Gavil's car. It was gray and always made a strange noise when reversing, a sound like children's toys rattling together. Posh suddenly recalled hearing that exact sound before at the workshop when a car was reversing. It was a breakthrough. The pieces were starting to align. Kennedy shared his final thoughts with a heavy heart, locking himself in the kitchen, determined to take the ultimate step to atone for his past. In a moment of sheer desperation, he turned on the gas, hoping that his death would somehow offer redemption for the horrors he had committed. Kennedy couldn't bear the thought of Freddie learning the truth about his dark past, nor the shame of seeing him in prison. If he died, at least the life insurance would go to Freddie, giving him a chance at a better life. Meanwhile, Gaval lived a quiet, solitary life in his family's old house, working at a donation foundation. But his mind was never at peace. He was haunted by memories of his wife, Uma, who had left him for another man. The bitterness still stung as Uma had constantly belittled him for being unable to provide for her. She had scorned him for relying on his family's dwindling inheritance, always reminding him of his failures. Goal spent his days at the foundation, trying to fill the emptiness with work, but it was never enough. Uma had never found satisfaction in their marriage. She had worn him down over the years, forcing him into submission, treating him like a child who couldn't assert himself. Uma didn't stop at blaming Gaval for their crumbling marriage. She cast her fury on his parents, accusing them of failing to raise him properly. She also resented her own father for forcing her into a marriage that promised respectability but delivered only hardship. Uma had dreamed of a life of comfort, but instead she found herself trapped in financial struggle. Her bitterness grew, and she found ways to express it, openly having an affair with another man right under Gavil's nose. This betrayal cut deep, and it sparked something dark within him. Gaval began to fantasize about revenge, longing to kill both Uma and her lover, wherever they might be. His hatred for women began to grow, and it became an obsession he could not shake. That night, Gaval prepared for what he believed was his inevitable next step. He dressed meticulously and gathered his tools, ready to hunt his next victim. Meanwhile, Posh and Logan Nathan were hot on his trail, heading to the workshop to investigate the source of the strange children's toy sound from the car. The mechanic, to their relief, knew exactly where Gaval lived. When they arrived at his house, they found it empty. But there was something chilling. A photo of the fifth victim, her face staring back at them, was found along with a clue that gave them a name, Sylvain Gaval's real identity. Then Posh stumbled upon a receipt from a cafe, adding another piece to the puzzle. Without hesitation, they decided to head to the cafe, hoping it would lead them closer to their suspect. As they drove toward the cafe, Logan suddenly pieced together a crucial detail. All of the victims had dimples, just like Selvin's wife, Uma. The realization hit hard. The motive was now clear. Selvin wasn't simply killing women at random. He was seeing them as his wife by forcing them to kneel and look him in the eye. He made them beg for forgiveness, demanding respect and acknowledgement that he had never received in his own life. It was as if he was reclaiming some of the dignity that had been taken from him by Uma in his past. Posh felt a surge of sympathy. He understood now how both Kennedy and Gaval had been shaped by toxic environments, driven to commit terrible acts by their broken pasts. But Logan Ayan wasn't moved by this realization. To him, the past didn't excuse the present. A criminal was still a criminal, and it was their job to catch them, not to dwell on their histories. He reminded Posh that even those with dark pasts struggles not defining their duty. As Posh absorbed Logan Nathan's words, his thoughts drifted back to the scars on Logan Ganathan's back. He realized that Logan Nathan had likely faced his own demons, his own battles that had shaped him into the man he was. Still, Posh couldn't help but acknowledge that Logan wasn't just any officer. There was a depth to him that went beyond the badge. When they arrived at the cafe, the staff immediately recognized Salen. He had been sitting by the window for days staring out at the view. Through the window, they could see a hotel building with a poster featuring a female singer scheduled to perform there. For Cash was told to stay in the car and keep an eye on things while Logan Nathan went to investigate. The hotel staff had already given Logan Nathan, the singer, the room number, so he headed straight there. Inside the room, however, everything appeared normal. The singer was there, but Selvin was nowhere to be found. It seemed like a dead end. Meanwhile, Selvin was on his way up to a different room in the hotel. Just as Loganathan was assessing the situation, the doorbell in the singer's room rang. To Loganathan's surprise, it wasn't the singer's visitor. It was Selvin himself, now targeting Veena. Selvin pretended to be out of breath and urgently asked Veena for help retrieving his inhaler from his car parked outside. Loganathan quickly updated Posh, explaining that the singer was not Selvin's target. She had only just arrived that morning, and Selvin had been carefully watching his victims for days. It became clear Selvin was after Veena next. Posh entered the cafe and took a different vantage point, scanning the area more closely. That's when it hit him. Selvin had been watching another hotel building across the street. Posh remembered something. He had spoken to Vanna on the rooftop of that very building, and she too had dimples. A cold realization washed over him. Without wasting another second, Parash called Vaya to warn her, but it was already too late. By the time the call went through, Selvin had already taken her. Parash and Logan, Nathan quickly lost track of them, scrambling to make sense of the situation. It wasn't long before they tracked down the location, an abandoned building, the sound of bats echoing in the still air, giving it away. Posh and Logan Nathan rushed to the site, adrenaline pumping. Inside, they found Veena lying unconscious. Logan Nathan moved toward her, but before he could reach her, Selvin emerged from the shadows, launching a brutal attack. He hit Logan on multiple times, the surprise and force of the strikes taking Logan on off guard. A struggle ensued, but ultimately Selvin cornered Logan on and used his signature move to knock him unconscious. Now with Logan and An out of the picture, Posh was left facing Selvin alone. Selvin once again emerged from the shadows, striking Posh across the head with a wooden plank. Dazed but determined, Posh fought to stay conscious, his vision blurry. He tried to fight back, but Selvin quickly disarmed him, grabbing Posh's gun and firing without hesitation. The shot missed, but Posh immediately realized something. Part of the gun had jammed, preventing the bullet from firing properly. Seizing the opportunity, Posh threw rocks at Sun, each hit causing pain. Enraged by the malfunctioning gun, Sun hurled it back at Posh, who managed to catch it with quick reflexes. As the Academy's best marksman, Posh knew what to do. He quickly fixed the jam, his hands steady despite the tension building in his chest. He hesitated for a brief moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. But then, remembering Logan Nathan's words about doing what was necessary, Posh found the courage to pull the trigger. The shot rang out, and Selvin fell lifeless. With the threat finally over, Posh, Logan, Nathan, and Veena